Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 143 of How Do You Write? I'm Rachael Herron. I'm thrilled that you're here with me today as I talk to Abdi Nazemian, who was a delight. And he talks about something we don't talk a lot about on this show, which is being in a TV writer's room, which to me is completely fascinating. I loved talking to him. I also have read, since we chatted, his novel, Like a Love Story, which is one of my top reads for the last long while. It is really beautiful. It's just such a love story to the late 80s, early 90s in New York. It is incredibly gorgeous, and the characters are so rich, and it made me cry. So I highly recommend it. I thought it was wonderful. You will enjoy the interview, I know. A little catch up around here. I shared last week that I've been struggling with a little bit of depression, and I say a little bit because it really is pretty darn lightweight. It allowed me to do everything that I needed to do for months and nothing more. Nothing more exciting. As I spoke to you last week, I'd already been talking to my doctor about adjusting my medications, and my medications are the kind where they say you won't feel any difference for a month. And then, in fact, what happens is I feel a difference within 3 days. I'm already coming out of it. Over this past weekend, I did all the summer things I hadn't done, like putting up the hammock and replanting some plants and cleaning off the front porch and setting up the sewing table, which is behind me in the video, that had been on the front porch for months. And it's September. I finally got the wherewithal to do some summer tasks, which is just part of the depression, right? I was not able to do anything extra, the things that go a long way to making me happy. And I've been able to do them this week. And it feels great. I'm so blessed that I, number one, have insurance through my wife. And number two, that I listen to my body and that I think about what it's trying to tell me. Although I don't always read the signs as often or as early as I would like, I do eventually end up there. So I wanted to update you on that. Thank you for the notes of caring and concern that came through. I really appreciated those. Y'all know who y'all are. So what else? Got a couple of new patrons. Angelica Whitehorn, thank you so much. And Tina Dolan signed up at the level that she gets creativity coaching, writing coaching with me once a month for half an hour, and I read some of her work. So if anybody's interested in doing that or any of the other perks that I have over on Patreon, you can look at patreon.com/Rachel. The big thing I do there is write essays, and right now my essays are centering around letting go of some of this rigidity and control issues that I have. It's been very fun to think about and very fun to write, and I like being as open as I can on the page, kind of like I am on the show. So if you like what you hear here, you might like to go over and pledge $1 a month, and then you get to read all the backlist essays. I'm sure there's probably about 30 in there now. So yeah, enjoy that if you'd like to. Otherwise, everything is going swimmingly over here. I have been doing some rejiggering on some book structures that I thought that I had nailed. In particular, the one that I've been working on for the synopsis. And you've heard me talk about the synopsis and pages that need to go to my agent like now. I finally realized what the problem with the book was. I did not have a character through line, a really good, strong character arc and character change in this book. This is my 27th book or so, and I went back to book 2 problems where things were happening to my character and she was reacting to them, and eventually she was going to be strong about them. But still, these things were happening to her, not because of decisions that she had made. And the book, now that I've changed everything that way, is going to be so much stronger, and I feel relief about that. But it did take some real thinking. So if you are dealing with a book that is giving you fits, maybe go back to the beginning. Look at your character arc. Look at the theme for your book that you want to carry through this book, that you want to illustrate by the character arc change. To me, those things are what we build plot around. Plot is great if you have it. We absolutely need it for our books, but the plot has to be organic and integral to the characters change over the course of the book, right? And sometimes what that really does mean is just getting out a blank notebook and starting to redraft some of your concepts of these characters. So if you ever want me to go into more detail about that kind of thing, shoot me a note. I don't know how interesting that kind of discussion is, but I would be willing to go into it if anybody expressed interest. You can always drop me a line over at howdowyourwrite.net or to email Rachael@rachelherron.com, or on Twitter. I'll see it, although I'm not really reading outside Twitter. I am reading all my replies on Twitter. So you can hit me anywhere and tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you're writing about, what you would like me to talk about. And now let's just jump right into the awesome, incredible, exciting interview with Abdi, who is a fantastic writer. Please enjoy. Well, I could not be more pleased to welcome to the show today Abdi Nazemian. Hi, Abdi.
Hi, how are you, Rachel?
I'm so good, and I'm very excited to talk to you. You have a
Did I pronounce your name right, by the way?
yes, and did I pronounce yours right?
Yes, you did. You actually did such a good job, which is, I think, what made me very cognizant of name pronunciation, because I'm not used to it. It really like threw me off that you said my name right.
I'm a California girl. Let me give you a little introduction. And I'm so excited to talk to you because you have a different bio than many of the people who are on this show. So I'm excited for this. Okay, Abdi's now I'm going to screw it up. Abdi Nazemian is the author of Like a Love Story and The Authentics. His novel The Walk-in Closet won the Lambda Literary Award for LGBT debut fiction. His screenwriting credits include the films The Artist's Wife, The Quiet, and Menendez Blood Brothers, and the television series The Village and Almost Family. He has been an executive producer and associate producer on numerous films, including Call Me by Your Name, which is just one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen in my life. Little Woods, The House of Tomorrow, and Scotty and the Secret History of Hollywood. He holds a BA from Columbia University and an MBA from UCLA Anderson School of Management. He lives in Los Angeles with his fiancée and 2 children. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You work in writers' rooms and stuff.
I do. I do. That's why we have to do this on a weekend, because I'm in a room all day.
I
Yeah.
want to get into the regular questions that I sent you and stuff like that,
Sure.
but you are
Oh, you
definitely
can ask me whatever. You don't
okay.
have to
You're the first person I've ever
stick to
talked
the
to
script.
who was in a writer's room, and as a writer, a writer's room sounds so. At the same time, it sounds very glamorous, and at the same time, I expect you're just eating Cheez-Its 8
I
hours a
don't think
day.
glamorous is the word I would think of. It's really fun. Definitely lots of eating snacks. Yes.
How many other people tend to be? How many other writers are in a writer's room? I know that can vary, but
That really varies. Although I will say both. I was in a writer's room last year and a different one this year, and in both cases it was 8, which I think
oh,
is
okay.
probably like a good mean number. They can be smaller, they can be bigger. So, but I would say around it hovers around there.
How do you get from 8 people in a room talking to words on a page that are then put on the screen? Like, is there is it like the low man on the
Lots
totem
of
pole has
lots
to
of
type,
boards.
or
There, well, you have a writer's assistant.
oh,
So
and
yes,
he or
so
she is the typist kind of thing?
yes, the writer's assistant takes notes, and then when the room lets out at the end of the day, the writer's assistant usually has to stay even later than everyone else. So that's I feel horrible. Sometimes you get notes at like 1 in the morning, and you're like, oh my God, you were working until 1 in the morning. But yes, so it actually is one of the things that I love about a writer's room is you do get to just turn on your kind of creative brain without worrying about note taking or remembering, because it's so many ideas get thrown out in the course of a day that nobody could be expected to remember every single one.
Right.
But then you have these notes that are sent, and you use a lot of boards and organizing, and it's really just breaking a whole season of TV together. And then once that's done, you start to get more into the writing of each episode, and often they're happening hand in hand because like there's each episode's in a different stage at different
Oh
points.
my goodness.
So, as somebody's writing the, third episode, somebody's outlining the fourth, and then you're getting ready to break more stories for the fifth, and,
Does that writer's
and
assistant like keep a Bible of what's going on in the show so you can refer back to it, or do you have to hold that on your head?
no, I mean, you have boards. And again, I'm only going off of two writers' rooms. Every writer's room is different.
Yeah.
Their showrunners really kind of can run the writer's room the way that they want to. But for the most part, at least in my experience, you have these kind of big season boards where you're tracking what's happening, and as you make one change, often it has a domino effect. So you're kind of going back, and yes, you will usually have like a kind of master board or document, depending on the room you're in. You keep track differently, and you often have character boards that are really because often in television you have so many characters that you start to, if you focus on one, it might affect the other one's arcs. So, you have separate kind of
Right.
boards that are just tracking each character's journey. So you can make sure that you're, serving their arcs.
What is it like working with that many other writers? Are there arguments? I want to know.
Honestly, I'm
Or is it pretty
sure there are in
smooth?
other writers' rooms, not in the ones that I mean, I feel like in both cases I just really lucked out with showrunners who I feel like everything, it's like writers' rooms are like any group,
Right.
job where
Yeah.
it's top down, culture. And if a showrunner is kind and leads with, empathy and rewards creativity and just creates a good environment, I find that that's just the environment of the room. So I've never, I've heard many stories.
I've
and I'm
heard
sure
stories.
many of them are true. But I don't have any firsthand experience. And my hope is that the culture is changing in general
Yeah.
because more people are speaking out. And, I think that in general, the friends I have who are in writers' rooms currently seem to be having really good experiences. So it's not at all. I mean, you definitely have like nice, healthy debates about what is best
Of
for the
course.
show or
Yeah.
what could happen to a character. And, I think the one thing that is very important to me about writers' rooms for writers who are curious about it is that you have to put your ego aside. No, your idea, like you have to be ready if your idea isn't the direction that the show is going in to let it go. You can't make it about like pushing your own ideas or agenda. You certainly, you have to voice everything because that's why you're there. But you also have to be ready to just let go. And I think for a lot of writers who come from, whether you come from books or you come from film or TV or playwriting, you can be very used to working on your own and being, ultimately servicing your own vision. And I think on the show, you're really finding both a common vision, but also really serving the vision of the showrunner. So it's just different. I think it's really fun, and I love it. I like collaborating with other people. You laugh a lot,
I bet.
anytime you're in a room with a group of people, for
Especially
that
a room
long, it's
full
like
of
being in summer
creative
camp.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and creative people. But it's like, you start to have inside jokes and things crack you up where you're just like, why am I even laughing this hard? It's that kind of thing where you're like stir crazy in a room
And that is
and
absolutely the opposite experience of sitting at your desk for 6 hours
yes.
by yourself working on a novel.
They're pretty much opposite experiences. And I will say, like, for me at least, like, I don't know how. I mean, my life is very like hard to manage at the moment, but I hope that I can do both because as much as like working on a novel it's much lonelier. It's, you pull your hair out a lot more. Like, I also feel like the gratification you get from putting something in the world that is solely your own and is
Yeah.
going from your heart and brain and soul directly to the reader is a different experience. Like,
Yeah.
a lot more people watch the TV stuff I work on, but when somebody tells me that they read my book and cried or had a certain response, it affects me in a different way than when someone watches a TV show I worked on, because they're responding to like my personal. So I like doing both. I also feel like it's nice to have a break. Like when you're working on a novel for a long time, it's nice for me at least, because my novels tend to be very personal. It's nice to have a little break to go work on someone else's vision for a while, because I'm like, I need to be out of my head now.
So that leads me to the question about process then. So right now, as you're in this writer's room, are you working
Yeah.
on anything on your own, or are you kind of like playing with ideas in the back of your head while you're driving to work, or?
Well, God, I wish I was working on another novel, but I'm not. It's been real, honestly, like I also have two kids.
Yeah.
And one thing I did, I mean, I mostly did the work on this before I was in the writer's room, but I am working on an adaptation of like a love
Ooh.
story, my book.
Ooh,
So
yes.
so I was still very much kind of in that book. And I just honestly, I haven't had time. So I hope that when I'm out of the writer's room, the next book will find me and
Yeah.
force me
Well,
to write it.
I always think of
But
people
yeah,
who
that
are
takes time.
in industries that involve words, like publishing or editing or even
Yeah.
teaching literature. I think it must be very hard to take. You're using your creative mind and thinking about words all day long. I can only imagine that it's almost impossible to do that when you're off work.
Right. And also my writing process, at least with books, it's very different with TV because TV is like they tell you when to write, you don't get to pick and choose, you know. But with books, I tend to be a very high maintenance writer. Like I like to go to a hotel, I like to like be alone, you know, I have to get away, I have to turn off, I have to like go into some kind of weird zone. Like I'm not one of those. Like I was on a book tour with a bunch of authors for this book earlier this year, and like one of the writers, we would be like in a different city every day and going straight to a book appearance and like then to dinner, and then like there was one of the writers who after dinner would be like, okay, I'm going to write, and
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God.
I'm sorry, like we just flew in, went straight to the bookstore, then had dinner with like 12 people, you're going to write, you know?
I know people like that, and I
And
admire them so much.
yeah, I do too, but I'm not that
I am
person.
not
I'm a
either.
like, you know, I'm a very like I need to get into some kind of, you know, weird headspace, like magical headspace, and I can't do that when I'm working all day in a room and taking my
Yeah.
kids to school and having dinner with them and tucking them in, and you know,
Yeah.
that's so usually I tend to write my books when I have a chunk of free time and I can get away, at least the beginning. Like rewriting is a different art where I can fit it in piecemeal, but when
Hmm.
I'm finding a new voice or looking for characters or story, it's usually in some hotel room somewhere, sometimes down the street, sometimes in the city I live in, honestly.
I love that
But
you
I,
know that about yourself.
yeah,
There is, you know, the majority opinion says, well, I just get up and write in the morning and then that's my writing. And
no,
you have a different
not
take on that.
I am not that person. I've even like checked myself in for a night once in a while when I have something to do that's really like, you know, where there's a deadline and I know it's going to require me to go deep into some zone,
Yeah.
then I just I don't know. And I didn't used to be this way when I was younger and starting out as a writer. I
Yeah.
found it much easier, but also I didn't used to balance as much. You know, I didn't
Exactly.
used to. Now I have like TV and books and kids and you know this and that. It's very different.
That's
So I
so
need to check it.
interesting to me.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. But I do feel like what I need, you know, and part of it is that your brain, I think, I don't know, every writer is different. My brain can't, when I really want to find a character and their voice, like I can't have all these other voices in my head. So that's part of what it is. I just like need to go somewhere where I can tell everything else you're on hold
Mm.
as do this,
And your partner is
you
just
know?
like, goodbye, see you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's the beauty of having a partner, and honestly he travels a lot more for work than I
Oh,
do,
okay.
so he really gets it. He gets that, you know, like often like once a year I usually leave. It's only usually I'll go for like 2 days or three, but once a year I go for like a little longer. I'll go for like 12 days usually.
Hmm.
And I mean, I've written sometimes in 12 days I write like 150 pages of a new book or a full movie script, or you know, because it's like pent up in me. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I don't write every day. I don't
Yeah.
like, I'm not one of those people who wakes up every day and writes and
Yeah.
exercises the muscle in that way. So,
Oh, that's so
you
a binge writer. My wife is always like,
know, a binge
you're a
writer.
binge writer. That's exactly what you are.
Writer.
But
That's right.
I would love to do the hotel thing, but I feel like I travel for work enough, and my wife is like always, I have to take care of all the dogs again by
Right.
myself. Okay, goodbye.
I know.
So,
I know, and that's and it's hard. I mean, the hotel thing is a real luxury, and it's like an expense, and et cetera,
but
et cetera. But
so fun.
so
So
fun.
fun.
And when I look at like the expense versus what I get back out of it, it's wild how
Yeah.
much I'll get.
And you
You
know
know,
that, and you embrace that. That's part of
I
your
I do.
process. What is
Yes.
your biggest challenge when it comes to writing? And this can be in the writer's room or on your own. Any of these questions can apply to either.
I mean, other than just balancing the fact that I have a lot to do because I'm not, you know, I'm not only doing one thing. I'm kind of pushing myself to do television and books. I still work in film. I have two children. Like the balancing of the schedule is very hard.
I feel very honored that you got me in on a Saturday afternoon.
I know.
Seriously, thank you.
But so that's very hard. I mean, as far as the actual process of writing, for me at least, the hardest, oh God. I mean, the two hardest parts are both the blank page process where I have no idea what I'm going to write next, which would really be more of a book, thing, because in TV you usually get a job and you already have a story you're working on. But like the process of like not knowing what your next book is, and it's like, what do I even want to say? Like oftentimes when I finish a book, I feel like I've said everything I ever need to say, and I'm like, I don't know what else I have to say that's valuable. And so that is really frightening. Then I love the first draft. If I know what I'm writing, I love the first draft process. Then it's the rewriting that's the hardest after that. Rewriting is brutal.
What is your biggest joy when it comes to writing?
Oh, the first draft. If I know,
that's wild.
Once I know what it is, not the finding of it, like the first chapter, no.
Yeah.
But like once I've found a voice and I know generally what the story is, and especially with my books, I don't outline them. So like with like a love story, for example, I had no idea when I sat down to write that it was going to end up being three narrators. I didn't even know it would be a love story. I didn't know what
That's so cool.
it would be about. I just had this character in this world, and I knew I wanted to write about what it was like growing up, in the late 80s, early 90s as a, gay immigrant like I was. And that's where I was going. But the process of writing that first draft as it was flowing, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and suddenly characters were coming and situations were happening that I didn't predict, and it was like, it felt very magical.
That's the opposite of me. I've struggled through first drafts, and I just realized I'm dealing right now with like thinking a lot about my own control freakism. And I think that's why I don't like first drafts, perhaps, because those other things keep coming in. I'm like, wait, no, I didn't plan for you. I did not invite you.
It's a letting go process.
You have to let go.
You have to let go. And I am a control freak, though. I wonder, maybe I'm better at letting go than
maybe that's just where you're able to. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, maybe. Well, it is. I think part of what's so exciting to me about that is when TV has been my primary job for 20 years, you really have to outline everything because you have to get outlines approved before you're even sent to script. So for me, I think the process of letting go and writing a book without an outline and just seeing where it takes me is like, it feels like this weird privilege. And it's, and it also is like you learn so much about yourself because you're like, oh, I didn't even know this was on my mind, or, things happen where you don't, they're even surprising to you. It's like this, you're having just like a very intimate experience with your subconscious that way.
Oh, terrifying,
cool.
Terrifying.
Well, yes, it is terrifying, but that's what's fun. If you get over the terror into the fun part, that's why I feel like the very beginning is terror, where it's like what it is. Then when at least for me, once I find it, it's like, oh, this is so fun. Then once I have to go back and rewrite, it's so hard.
And see, I love rewrite. I could live and rewrite. I write a first draft just to rewrite. Just
rewrite it. I don't know. I like write the first. I feel like I talk to a lot of writers who are like you, who love rewriting.
But we're all, it's like having straight or curly hair. We're all jealous of each other.
Right.
It's
true.
But I am right now in that right in between books. And I say at least 3 or 4 times a day, there's a book in there. Like just as I'm walking through town or talking to people, oh, God, that could be a book. That could be a book. Yeah.
See, I'm one of those people who, like, if I write 50 pages of a book and I feel like it doesn't have to be like, obviously I know it's going to be rewritten, but if I don't feel like it's close to something I would want out there, I often just
abandon,
like sit and abandon. Yeah. I mean, Inbetween the Authentics, which was my book before Like a Love Story and Like a Love Story, I think I started to write 2 or 3 other books that I abandoned. Yeah.
I can't remember.
So I'm also like an abandoner of books.
I think it might have been Anne Perry I heard recently say that she writes the first 80 pages of a book and then decides whether it has earned its worth.
Yes. And I think that was like me. I think I wrote 50 pages of 2 different books. Though I will say, for one of those books was a completely different contemporary story where the narrator was Judy, who ended up hopping from that into Like a Love Story into a new era. but she was the same character, like the same
That's
voice, the same.
magical.
Um, and she had a gay uncle in that, and it was very much like I felt like this thing happened where I started to write like a love story from the perspective of Reza, the Iranian character, and then suddenly I was like, wait a minute, like she feels like she is going to have a friendship with him, and then everything flew.
Oh, that's serious.
That was cool.
That's serious
So like
magic.
sometimes I
Yeah.
feel yeah, and I do feel like there's power in realizing something is not going well because the power in it is you're like this one isn't right, but you still did a lot of work on that that could find its way.
It's a
And I've
delicate
talked to other writers.
it's a delicate balance though too, because you have to, when you are working on a project that you are now committed to, you also have those days where you're like, this is literally the worst thing that's ever happened to the universe, and I'm
Yeah,
making it. And you still have to maintain, you have
I
to go
know.
back to that after you kind of married it past those 50
I
pages.
know.
You've committed. So,
Yes. Yes. Not
oh,
easy work. I don't know why anybody does
I don't
this.
know why we do it either. Can you share a craft tip of any sort with us?
God. I mean, I've talked about this on other things, but I'm a big fan of The Artist's Way. If you haven't heard
I
of it, I can tell you
love
more. The Artist's
Julia.
Way.
Tell me how it
Oh, yeah,
affect.
yeah.
Tell me how it affected you.
So I've done it many, many times, and I've done all the books because eventually, I don't know if you like me discovered a long time ago, you sometimes feel like you need a reset, and you're like, well, I've already
Yes.
done the first book, so you go to the second book, and then I did the third book, and then I did them all at a certain point. I'm like, well, I'm going to go back to the first. So I did the first one recently. The first time I did The Artist's Way, I think was when I was writing what became my first novel, and I just felt like a friend of mine had recommended it to me, and I felt like writing novels was going to be a very different creative endeavor than writing movies and TV, and so I felt like I needed to get deeper into my consciousness. And so I was very, like most people who I recommend The Artist's Way to, I was very skeptical in the beginning.
Well, it's woo
And
woo, it's feely,
it's
it's all the
very
things.
feely, and it's very, I mean, now I'm like, I use all of it, and I recommend it far and wide. But for me, it felt like this really, like you start with a lot of resistance. And for those people who don't know The Artist's Way, it's this 12-week course that's supposed to unlock your creativity. And the two kind of foundations of it are writing morning pages, which is 3 longhand journal pages every morning, and then taking yourself on an artist date once a week, which sounds so silly on the page, but is so
It's
great.
wonderful. Yeah.
So great. And so I felt like it really just worked. Like I feel like something mysterious happens where you in the process of like doing all the exercises that she prescribes to you, you start to feel freer creatively and just unlocked in a lot of ways. So I don't know. I mean, it's not like I don't know how. I'm sure there's a lot of like someone could speak more scientifically about why it works. I just know that when I've done it, I mean, even honestly, even for someone who's not creative, I feel like it would just make you a happier person
I
because it's like you're
agree.
just yeah. So I love it, and I feel like I don't do it like I'm not doing it now because I'm in a writer's room, and it would be really hard to. It's so time consuming. Like you don't realize how much time you need to like do all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think it's really great. There's other little things like that I've picked up along the way. Like I mean, I always like when I'm writing, I always have a journal file open on my computer so that if I get frustrated, I go straight. Like someone had told me a long time ago, a great screenwriter, that he when he's writing, if he gets frustrated, the trick is not to stop writing. So if you're frustrated, just go to your journal, vent into your journal about what's frustrating you, and then once you're done, you just go right back. But just don't stop the fingers moving.
I've never actually
Um,
heard that said, but that is something I do. And there's only one problem with that is that if anyone were to ever read that part of my journal,
oh
that
yeah,
particular
I know.
journal, it is just whinging. It is just
I know.
it's just,
Oh, if you read mine is usually me giving myself like like it'll be
me
me going to
too.
journal being
I
like
could do it. Yes.
keep writing, keep fighting,
Just
don't
keep your
stop.
fingers
Like,
moving. I'll put,
just
just
keep going.
45 more minutes. Yeah.
I know. It's so funny because I feel like was it like yesterday that I was doing some writing and I was like, I have to remember someday to just put this journal in the trash and like delete it so that nobody finds it.
I'm terrified of that.
But yeah,
Terrified.
it's a lot of that. It's a lot of like just me pumping myself up.
But it's so helpful and it works. That's the thing.
It works.
A lot of
Yeah,
times
it
I'll
works.
actually switch to longhand too if I need to. Especially if I'm writing and I'm stuck,
Yeah,
I start
that's
doing that longhand.
yes, I like that. And sometimes I'll do like sometimes I'll start before I write doing word association longhand, which I think is really fun. Like if you're writing about a particular theme or time in your life, just taking a little time to like write the word and then whatever
Yeah.
words you associate just to it like I feel like for me a lot of like the craft part of it is like anything you can do to get into your subconscious brain
I've been
because
using tarot cards recently.
what
And
do
you
you
just you pull like I'm just gonna pull the what's at the top right now, Queen of Swords,
uh-huh
and then I write that down, and that's about intellectual completion, and it's about strength and directness, and I'll just let myself think about those qualities in myself and just kind of start typing and see where it goes, see what memories are
oh
triggered and write around those, and it's just a back door to the subconscious. That's all it is.
I love that.
It's
Yeah, which
fun.
I think is a lot. I love that. I have a friend who does tarot. I'm actually seeing her tomorrow.
Ooh.
I I love that because I think a lot of like writing is so much more so much of it is hard to it's hard to talk about craft because I feel like a lot of the craft part of it is about how do you let go of your brain. It's almost like the inverse of how we think of most skills, where it's like about like
Yes.
powering
Yes.
when applying. And when I used to teach screenwriting, I used to teach a screenwriting class, and the first reading I assigned was from a book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and the students always laughed because they thought it was so absurd. But the basic premise of this book, I grew up playing tennis, so bear with me for a minute. But the basic premise of the book is that if you want to be a tennis player, you have to practice your strokes like for hours and hours and hours, so that when you're in an actual match, it's all like muscle memory in your brain, so that you can't like because when you're in an actual match, you can't be thinking like put your foot here, put your thing here.
Right.
You have to go into it's the same process. It's the same thing with like learning music. Like you've got to practice that piano so much that when you actually go to perform, you're not thinking anymore about what finger belongs where. You're trusting that you have it. And I feel like a lot of writing for me
Mm.
is that, and that's why I would always give that to the students because I felt like yes, like we're going to talk about structure and voice and character and plot and all of these different things. But when you sit down to write, if you're thinking about plot or structure, the writing's going to suck. You know what I
That
mean?
is
Like,
beautiful. What a good
you can't
way
think
to
about
put that.
yeah. So it's a lot of prep work. And then before you write, find whatever it is, tarot, word association, find something that will help get you into that subconscious. So you're not pushing the writing forward with your, conscious brain.
And the subconscious is always right. It's the only part of
Yeah.
me that is always right,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. You have to trust. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
And that is
But I
something,
like
for
tarot. I might try tarot.
you
That's
should
so
try it. I
fun.
just pull a card a day
That's
and I write
really
about it for like 15 minutes. And I have gotten
uh,
some magical things out of it. And interestingly, some of those turn into got to get the work done, So
mm-hmm.
it turns into another like really boring entry, but
Right.
some of them turn out really interesting. So yes, try it. Talk to your
Fascinating.
tarot
Okay,
friend tomorrow. Maybe
I will.
she'll give you a deck. I know she's got quite a few.
Oh, she has many decks. The last time I was
Yeah.
at her house, she pulled decks for us, and like she pulled cards, and we each got like it was a goddess tarot set, and
Ooh,
we each got like
so
a
fun.
goddess and an intention. Yes.
Oh, I love that.
Nice.
Well, this has been a joy to talk to you today.
Thank you.
Now, I would like you to tell us a little bit about your latest novel and where we can find you online.
Sure. My latest novel is called Like a Love Story.
Also, by the way, all your books have gorgeous covers. Like you
Oh,
have
thank you.
stunning covers. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, I've lucked out with covers. I love the latest cover. So yeah, so Like a Love Story it's a novel that takes place in 1989 and 1990, and it's about three teenagers who get involved in ACT UP AIDS activism in New York City. And it's also a love story, but like I always tell people, it is a love story, but to me, more than anything, it's a love letter to activism, to art, and to the spirit of love and friendship and the queer community. So it's deeply personal. I'm very excited about it. It's been beautiful having it out in the world.
You get such a beautiful, happy look on your face when you talk about it. Like you just
I know.
you just beamed like you were talking about one of your kids.
Well, it feels like this book especially. I mean, I love all my books, but this one feels like it has been living inside me for a long, long time. And honestly, like as somebody who felt like with good reason for most of my career, I couldn't write queer stories or Iranian stories because I was in an industry that just didn't want them. And when I did write them, they would be rejected. To have this book out in the world and to have it, to have the response that it's gotten, it just feels like both like, wow, the world is moving in a positive direction in some ways, which I know we all need to hear right now. And also just very personally validating, because all my life I thought I'd be rejected for who I am. And now it feels like I put it on the page and I'm being embraced. So it's really gratifying.
I can't wait to read it. I'm hanging up with you and going to purchase it. So that's my next step.
What was the second part?
Where can we find you online?
I'm mostly on Instagram. I'm Abdaddy. And I'm also on Twitter as @Abdaddy, and I don't even know how I'm on Facebook too. I don't go on it.
I don't either. I hate it.
But
I love Instagram.
Instagram is the one I tend to use the most.
Yeah.
Twitter, I'm on Twitter mostly for book stuff, but it really scares me.
I'm pretty much off it now. I loved it for a long time. Have your kids talked you into TikTok yet?
No, I did. It wasn't. My kids are too young for TikTok. Okay. They're 7. They don't. Ooh, God.
That would be way too young.
Soon. But somebody else, I think it was my fiance, told me that I had to go on TikTok, and I spent about 3 minutes before I ran and deleted. I deleted it and was like, oh my God.
I put it on my phone last night, and this morning I woke up and I saw its little icon. It had already sent me a push notification, and I think it should be called "You Could Be Reading." That's what TikTok, you could be reading right now. Like this, and I immediately dragged it to the trash. But those few minutes I did spend on it were brain numbing and super fun.
It's really, and this is like a really hard thing. I mean, this actually, like, I would like a podcast where authors are asked about how they balance their social media. I don't know what the word is, but needs or, the obligation, because I wasn't on most social media until I wrote my first book. I joined. I had one Instagram that was private, but I really joined Twitter and started a public Instagram because I was told I had to as an author. As a screenwriter, you're not expected to be the marketing voice of your project. Nobody cares about it.
That must be nice.
It's nice. The actors do all. Nobody wants to hear from the writer. They want to hear from the stars, which is great. But I find that as an author, it's really tricky because all this stuff we've been discussing about getting into your subconscious and freeing your brain, and social media is like the enemy of that.
It's the devil. Yeah, I've pretty much cut out everything out of my life except for I do maybe 20 minutes on Instagram a day. That's what I allow myself.
Yeah, but I like it. I mean, as I say that,
I love it.
I love it. And the thing I love most about it is if you read like a love story, you'll see I have very specific obsessions that are like, I'm obsessed with Madonna. I'm obsessed with old Hollywood and old Judy Garland and Joan Crawford and old stars and Tori Amos and all these very specific Tori. So I find that like on Instagram and on Twitter too, when I'm on it, it brings you to get you realize you have these these interests that you feel like nobody in the world is going to share the way that
queer sewing. Queer sewing is a thing.
There you go.
That's a niche, and I could just you go down. So it's called So Queer. #So SEW Queer.
God,
just
so queer.
Tumble down that rabbit hole, and it is a real affirming place to be.
That's the thing. So finding like-minded people is to me like the real beauty of social media, and and then when you write something that really celebrates, like with me, this last book really celebrates all my interests, and it brings all these people to you that, share those passions. And that part of it I do love. But yes, it is a time suck.
Thank you so much for this. This has been such a joy. And I will keep in touch with you. You're awesome. Thank you. And I will let you know when this is live. And have a wonderful afternoon with your family. And thank you for the time.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Abdi.